everyone. Today we have our the new episode, and we will discuss on how AI will improve educations. Uh, Today we are working with India Soft and India Global Chamber of Commerce. More than 3,000 people and entrepreneurs from around the world they join in the conference. And good news is that World Talent Economy Forums we are launching our chapter in India, World Talent Economy Forum India, with a knowledge chamber, with IIT. And this is one of the great initiative because we are helping Indian economy to uplift. And we are developing a master plan for 25 years, and it may be $32 trillion economy. So we are closely working with the Indian government, Indian largest corporation like Tata, and lot of knowledge chambers and group of companies. So hopefully today's dialogue will be helpful for our government agency, corporation, and academy. And we will discuss on AI will improve, how AI will improve education. We have our world famous speaker, Mr. Rob.
Yes. Oh, looks like he froze. Right after my introduction, too. Just sure if you're finished.
Mr. Rob. Yes.
Right. So AI and education. Do me a favor, if you're not speaking, mute yourself because there's some background noise coming through. All right. So we're at the stage of absolutely unbelievable advancement at the moment. 3 months ago, we weren't talking about generative AI at all. We were talking a little bit about transformative AI. We had conversational computers. We had bots. And most folks were really convinced that we wouldn't have anything truly useful for another 4 or 5 years. And then generative AI hit. ChatGPT 3 turned out to actually be reasonably good. Microsoft announced it was going to be putting it in everything. It was kind of very reminiscent of when they suddenly discovered there was an internet and they pivoted the entire company, pretty much doing the same thing with generative AI. And so now it's a race. And what's funny is over Google, their effort was pretty much sandbagged. They were convinced it wasn't good enough. They put off releasing it, and now suddenly they've released theirs in alpha form. So we've got ChatGPT now in its 4th generation. Google's counterpart in I would call it alpha, but since it's been released to an audience, maybe we call it beta now. And we've got a race. And the generative AI is a game changer, because with generative AI, you can now create text, you can create audio, you can create video by putting forth a simple direction. We're now at the point where we can tell a computer what to do in general terms, and it will fill the gaps and produce something. Now, the quality of that something is a little iffy at the moment, because it really depends on the training set that the generative AI has been given. And to give you a sense of how fast this is growing, ChatGPT 3 had a training set that was measured in the billions. The ChatGPT 4 has a training set that's measured in the quadrillion. So we skipped trillions and went right to quadrillion in terms of data elements. And so the amount of data these things have is pretty much incomprehensible. I mean, it's beyond our capability to understand. These sizes we weren't built for. But that does introduce a number of problems, and those problems are you can get a lot of very varied results based on how you enter your queries. And now education should probably be pivoting pretty hard to training people how to do queries, how to actually queries and commands, how to structure your project so that you can, with the least amount of effort possible and the least number of iterations possible, get to the result that you want. That's going to be a skill, and it's not going to be easy. Look how long we've had the internet, and people still don't know. Most people still don't know what Boolean logic is, let alone how to put forth an argument in it. Yet the internet search engines were all based around Boolean logic. So it would seem to me that everybody should have been trained on Boolean logic since the late 90s, and still we're at a point where almost nobody is. And so education really needs to come around to the concept that this is a tool that's not going away. It's a tool that will define the winners and losers, and probably define the advancement of your career, because much like in the past, there were jobs you couldn't get if you couldn't type, jobs you couldn't get if you couldn't use a calculator, jobs you couldn't get if you couldn't use a computer, and jobs you couldn't get if you couldn't use the right computer. So from mainframes to Windows, and in some cases even to Apple's platform, those were skill sets that were required to get a job. And it's no doubt in my mind within a couple of years, we're going to have that same thing with regard to generative AI, where part of your skill set is going to be talking to an AI and getting it to do what needs to be done in a very short period of time, and with a high degree of accuracy. And here lies the problem. When we've got these massive data sets, much of the data in those data sets is false, but it's been presented as true, and the AI often can't tell the difference. And if it can't tell the difference, you won't be able to tell the difference. So figuring out how to test the result and assure the quality of the result is another factor that goes into how kids should be educated. So not only how to command the AIs, but how to review the output so that you can assure the result. These are not going to be easy skills. And as we've certainly talked in the past, these AIs, this current generation GPT-4 is able to take 9-year-old competency tests and ace them, which shouldn't be a surprise. AIs taking tests should be one of the things that they should do very well. If they were failing tests, I would be more surprised than getting ace. But these are broad comprehension tests, which suggests the AIs are able to perform much like a 9-year-old might perform in the same job. If a 9-year-old had access to everything everywhere all at once, to use the title of a movie. So we've got a machine with the capability, with the intelligence of a 9-year-old, but with the knowledge of the universe. So that creates an interesting imbalance at the moment. And I like a number of other folks, I'm a little bit concerned about some of the things people are going to be doing with this. We've already seen that the impact on images and video. We're starting to be overwhelmed, I think, with videos that look like they're real but really are not. And images came out before, as these tools are used to create entertaining content, but also challenge our ability to tell what's real and what's not real. So we've got a number of challenges before us, and I'm not convinced given the fact that education never really stepped up to the internet, I'm not convinced that education is going to step up to generative AI either. But that does not reduce the requirement of being able to learn how to direct this tool and learn how to certify and assure its result. So I'll stop there and pass over to David Schumacher. But my opening is this is a major sea change, and education needs to pivot hard towards it. Otherwise, the kids are coming out of school will continue to be unqualified for the jobs that they'll be asked to do.
Yeah, Rob, I couldn't agree more. Thanks for that great introduction. And you're right, we're all talking about GPT-4. Yeah, that's the latest thing on stage these days. And while that's really important, and I play with that myself, I want to step back in time a little bit. Some years ago, I spent a significant part of my day teaching. I've started off at this in the military, actually teaching technical subjects. And when I got out of the military, I started teaching for public college, and then later went into teaching in private schools, and then started focusing in technology areas because that's where I was the strongest. And it was all manual in those days. I would sit down and I would write manual lesson plans. I would sit down and write tests. I would write various versions of the tests so that students couldn't pass questions and answers back and forth. I had endless amounts of paperwork from documenting student progress, what went on in the classroom, and then all the requirements for certain classes that were given by funding sources. When you teach, for example, at a community college, I was an adjunct, and the courses then were funded by somebody that wanted something taught. And then you had feedback for all of that. AI would have been wonderful at that time, or some type of dedicated assistant would have been wonderful at that time, because I actually spent the minority of my time teaching and the majority of my time doing all the support work around teaching. So that is on my wish list. Excuse me. That is on my wish list for how I want to see AI and how it can improve education, putting educators back into the job of educating instead of being administrators or babysitters or whatever other labels that you want to put on that. So there were tools at the time. Rob mentioned Microsoft and their pivot towards including GPT in their products. And I'm starting to see that in some other allied products. There's a particular search engine that I use that now has an AI front end that helps me craft the kind of questions that I want and let me have a two-way discussion with the search engine to go find things. And then I've worked with ChatGPT-3 to try to do that too. And from an educator standpoint, that can be really helpful because it can help me structure my lesson plans a little bit better. It can help me structure my tests better. And with the latest form of AI, it can do some of those tasks for me, at least first drafts, and allow me to go through and then fine tune them for exactly what I want, back to being more efficient, being better for me as a teacher, but I think perhaps better as my students, because as I would do various tests over the same subject material, the tests were not all equal. And I would have to find ways to grade them to balance them against what the curriculum was that was required, because maybe the test emphasized too much in one area, not enough in an area, or wasn't as clear as it could have been. These are things that AI, I think, will be doing in the short term for us and will really be a help as long as we can trust them. So here's the trust that I talk about. I'm not talking about the Hollywood version of AI and the distrust that comes from that. I'm talking just from my own human phobias. I've been around long enough that I remember in my early engineering classes back in the 1970s. Yes, they had engineering back in the 1970s. I was still using a slide rule for many things because that's what I'd been taught. And one of my engineering teachers told us to all go out and buy a specific brand of Hewlett-Packard calculator. And so I went out and did that, learned something called RPN, and learned how to use it. But trust was the biggest thing for me. So here's where everyone can have a little chuckle, and I chuckle at myself over this all the time. Probably for the first month I had that calculator, I would use the calculator to solve the problems that we were doing in class, because engineers are more concerned with the outcome than the mechanics of solving these fine equations. But then I would sit down and do all the equations by hand to check and make sure that the calculator got the right answer. I think we're going to have something like that going with AI as well, until we build this confidence that today I use the calculator to check my hand-done calculations. It's completely flipped around. So when you think about it, that's a way that AI has helped in education. And that's from the standpoint of, student, and the standpoint of the instructor or teacher or educator as well. We are in an exciting time, as Rob points out. And I'd like to talk about maybe on the next pass some specific tools that are out there that I think that can help the educators as well as students, things that help explain, things that help to do research. There's a number of great tools that are on the market right now that are only going to get better. And as you may have told before I pass the baton, I am very interested in seeing AI as a tool, a collaborator, something for me to work with, not something that replaces me. Dr. Sharif, would you like to point to the next person? You're still muted, by the way.
Okay, thank you, Mr. David Schumacher. Now I request Mr. Tom. He is expert of AI. So I think soon he's going to visit Bangladesh in Dhaka University.
Yes. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that trip. I'm looking forward to that trip next month. and doing a speaking tour there. But what I'm seeing is AI is forcing us to break academic paradigms that should have been broken a long time ago. Our educational system was designed to serve the industrial age, with one teacher, one manager up front, and students sitting in a row, and standardized testing that keeps everyone in the same framework, despite their individual cognitive styles or their intrinsic talents. And so I see that AI companions will be able to learn an individual's host or their individual hosts and be able to customize curriculum to each of their students' core capabilities and talents. And they can augment students with enhanced and specific knowledge. AI will offer students and employees continued education, suggestions on networking opportunities, and a career path that they wouldn't have thought of on their own. I see this. So I think it's really, we did not. The educational system, as Rob said, didn't keep up with the internet, and we're seeing the results of that now. But if we can get ahead of this, now that the digital natives are all coming into power here, that might change quickly. We had our analog childhoods, and so those analog solutions no longer apply. And so I think we're going to see this shift, and hopefully it'll be rapid and exponential as these digital natives get into power or get into teaching positions and that type of thing. And so I think it's going to be a really, if we can get our heads around it, it's going to be a very positive advent, very positive trend towards customizing, our curriculum to each individual student's core capabilities. And with AI, we can do that now. I've been saying, we've had a few of these podcasts where I've talked about how important it's going to be for anybody entering the workforce, especially young people, to have an AI companion, to have their own personal droid, whether it's an actual robot or just something in their phone. That because I think it'll be a necessary companion to have, because you will be that much more qualified for whatever position you're applying for if you have something that will keep you interested and keep you up to date on the latest news and innovations in the field that you're entering. And I think it's going to be a very necessary thing. And so the educational system has got to prepare for that. They've got to prepare for giving students and people entering the workforce what they need in order to compete properly. And I think that'll happen quickly. I think now that, again, as the digital natives are coming into positions of authority and to teaching positions, this type of thing, it'll shift hopefully quickly. And even in my own practice, I use AI with clients to hone the uniquely human skill sets that can't be coded or automated. Because one of our strengths is applying meaning to any situation. That's kind of what we do. And so one way I do that to exercise that quality is I use a site called Inspirobot. And what this AI does is it places random pictures with random words and in a kind of a motivational poster. And so it's sometimes these are completely nonsensical. Sometimes they're extremely hilarious, and sometimes they're very poignant and extremely profound. And so what I have clients do is I have them generate 3 of these posters, and then I have them apply meaning to them, as crazy as they may seem. I did one earlier just to test the idea. And you won't be able to see it, but basically it's this man standing on this roof, and it says, "Encouraging an imbecile to live like a psychotherapist is very, very amoral," which is just random words together in kind of a cool looking motivational poster. But I have clients apply meaning to that, because that's what humans do. We need to apply meaning to certain things. And so it's a great way to exercise that, using AI to exercise that unique human quality. And so there's other things I do, like, the whole way I wrote US 6, how do you entertain a super intelligent, AI that has access to every trope and motif and literary device that humans have ever come up with. How do you entertain that? And so, I can get into that, but that's later. But what I found was, and I did a talk at an Indian literary conference last year, where I advised new writers to pretend that their first draft, they were writing to an ASI, to an artificial superintelligence, because it frees you up. It's very liberating because you don't have to take into account rules like foreshadowing or repeating names for, human wetware to remember things. And so it's at least for a first draft, it's very liberating to write as if you're writing for an all-powerful artificial and superintelligence that will understand every reference you make. You can assume that it's had your same life story, that that it's had your same educational path, and it's just a great way. Later, you can go back in and fill in those holes for human readers. But it's and at some point we may have AI teachers, and who will understand everything that we are writing to them, and so we may see some. I don't think they should, but we may see some literary rules fall away, some content editing concepts fall away, because we'll be able to focus in on very original thoughts. So anyway, that's kind of where I'm seeing this, how AI will improve education if we catch up to it. And again, the customizing personal curriculum for individual students, using meaning, using AI to apply meaning in this way. Just there's a lot of ways that we can get our heads around using AI to improve our educational system. So that's my first statement.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Mr. Brintelman.
Thank you. Good morning or good evening, I guess, to Dr. Sharif. This topic is something that hits home for me right now, especially. I'm back in school currently, so I'm kind of figuring out how to apply all this stuff in the academia world firsthand right now, and it's interesting to watch the reactions of the professors and the students to all of this upcoming technology that's being released. There's just the fear and concern, and the xenophobic perspectives of people just not wanting to have anything to do with it. Both teachers and students alike, which is just interesting to me because as we've been discussing, there's just so many ways for this type of technology to help us complete our tasks and help us get to where we need to be in a more efficient manner. I compare it to some of my professors, looking in history, as David was describing, the coming of the calculator. It's, if we all just stuck with our abacuses, that's not a level, it's not a matter of human intelligence that we're not achieving. It's a matter of, we're not utilizing the tools that are around us, and we're, inhibiting our abilities inherently. And so, trying to use those types of ideas of, one of my professors, for instance, my digital marketing professor, this quarter, in the beginning of the quarter, the university I go to is a quarter system, not a semester system. But in the beginning of the quarter, the professor was vehemently against ChatGPT and AI. And I just kept slowly, dripping this type of information to her in her inbox, in her email. Like we were taking marketing certifications for HubSpot, an online education company. And HubSpot ended up releasing HubSpot GPT, I believe it was called, or ChatSpot or something along those lines, where it's this integrated marketing related AI that utilizes the ChatGPT technology to help with ad copy and creating different types of advertisements and things like that, but for marketing, landing pages, all sort of emails, all sorts of stuff. Everything that they were teaching us, suddenly they came out with an AI that does it for you. And so it's pretty wild to me, and I was constantly, and I'm the oldest one in the class, that's for sure. But I'm, telling all these kids about these programs and showing them, hey, look how useful this is. And it's interesting. I would have thought, that these younger generations would be much quicker to catch on to this stuff. But there's these major differences, between millennials and, these younger generations where, like for instance, none of these folks in their, early 20s and late teens are on Facebook. Not any, like just about none of them. They use Snapchat, Instagram, things like that. And so it's just really interesting to see these stark contrasts that are there, and the way that these folks are just deciding collectively to avoid using tools that have served very useful for us, as it seems. But I think that as time goes on, like we've been discussing, the educators and the students are going to start realizing how helpful this is. Tom, you mentioned briefly there the way that AI can help create curriculums and things like that. One of the most pressing and most inspiring concepts that I've considered related to AI and its application in education is the idea of having a teacher that is learning about the student in this advanced, artificial intelligence manner, where you have this teacher, maybe not a teacher, but an AI that is, in addition to the teacher that that's learning how you learn. When I was in school, in elementary school and middle school, and I'm sure most of us here can agree that we learned about these ideas of kinesthetic learning and auditory learning and visual learning, and that was the bulk primarily, but we understood how important it is to understand, these types of, the way that we learn, the way that we most favor retaining information. Similarly, we have the Myers-Briggs tests and all these other personality things that are, extrapolating more information in a way to help us learn how to interact with the world. And if AI continues on this trend, and we have this being, this conscious, well, let's not call it consciousness, but this intelligence, that's monitoring our development, it's going to understand eventually, one would imagine, how we learn and the ways that we're learning that are, different than our classmates. And these lessons will be able to be tailored to us specifically over time as these AIs understand that we are auditory or kinesthetic or visual. But then even further to, talking about acronyms and relating things to things that we're personally interested in, or creating songs about topics and making the songs in the theme of musicians and bands and things that we're already interested in, so that they just immediately, catch on, and we just instinctively memorize them because they're just, what resonates with us. And, given this might create some differences, in the classroom itself. I remember when we'd be learning songs about topics in elementary school and middle school, everyone's learning the same song, which, it's a little helpful. It creates a little sense of community and stuff. But I think, growing up in New York, for instance, myself, I think that one of the issues is class sizes already, and I think that this would help us be able to create an environment where the teachers can segment us off into smaller groups. The AIs themselves could understand, all right, well, we've got this classroom full of 20 kids, but these 3 are most similar in this way, and those 4 are most similar in this way. And the AI could, even break down these groups a bit smaller and give us all these different lessons that are tailored to our specific learning behaviors and styles and things like that. And I just see so much potential for this stuff if we can overcome this fear. And I think that there is a bit of a learning curve, because for me, when I'm doing my classwork currently, kind of like David was talking about, when he first started utilizing the calculator, it takes me a bit longer initially to get certain tasks done when I'm using artificial intelligence to augment my work than had I just been doing it on my own. And that's not across the board, but oftentimes, I use, there's a few different websites that I'll go on. There's AI Wizard, there's Luna.ai, AIWizard.ai, and FutureTools.io are the 3 websites I've found that just compile and aggregate lots of different types of AI, and you can search based on what you need it for and things like that. And so when I go on that website and I have tasks I need to do, be it for marketing or accounting or whatever class, I'll go there and I'll just kind of mess around with all these different programs and find which ones I like. And it takes some time to figure it out. But, then once I start figuring it out, and once I, gain some momentum, I'm able to do these tasks that would have normally taken me a couple hours, under an hour, 30 minutes, something like that. It's just that there's that initial, hump to overcome. But, I see that, the only person we're shooting in the foot by ignoring these technologies is ourselves. I think that in school and teaching, when they talk about when you're cheating in class, you're only cheating yourself. But I think that it's the other way around here, because 10 years from now we're going to need to know how to use these things, and we're going to be at a major disadvantage if we cheat ourselves out of understanding how to use these technologies. And so it's a bit interesting, and it's been really interesting to watch professors and students alike transition from this state of fear and avoidance of these things to realizing, hey, we really need to learn about these things. My digital marketing professor, for instance, like I said, she went from really not being a fan of this evolution that's occurring in our society to realizing that, hey, maybe I should teach courses on this. And it sounds like she's going to be developing classes for students at the university so that we can learn Chat GPT and other AI programs and things like that to help augment our work. And so it's a really exciting time, and it's the change is happening so fast. And I think it's just important for us to realize that for every fear that these changes and these advancements can trigger in us, there's so much progress that's occurring in such a rapid amount of time. It's just change can of course be uncomfortable, and it's forcing a lot of people to relearn their skill sets and relearn how they can contribute to society in ways that are useful and not moot, if you will. And it's just it's going to be an interesting transition, and it's nice to be right on the tip of the spear. Thank you, Dr. Sharif, and everyone once again. Cheers.
Thank you, Mr. David Smith.
Dr. Sharif, thank you. And David, I loved your example. I just had to get my calculator out. Let me take the background off and go ahead and use it to do some math that I haven't done in a while. But my abacus still works pretty well, I think, for doing part of my calculations and everything. But I agree with you. I was among the people, I'm dating myself here, back in high school when the first electronic calculators came out. And because of my background, yes, I got one of the very first Texas Instrument calculators. And teachers thought I was cheating. But then, a couple of years later, you saw them everywhere. And we began to see that. But to me, part of the very interesting things with the use of AI to improve education is education's long overdue for a change, as many of you have heard me say in the past. I used to say that, most of education today hasn't changed since the times of Socrates. We're using the same approaches, the same type of elements. And Brett, I love you talking about the class size, but back when I was in college, we had classes with 400 students in it. And you talk about a class size, and that was without using computers or any of the things to go ahead and augment it. So you see things like that. But if I begin to look at some of the other statistics that are kind of fun with this one, according to the publication e-learning industry, they actually predict that in the next couple of years, well over half of all education applications will be enabled by AI of some type. And I actually think from the adoption I've seen just with the last month, a couple of months, that figure is probably low as we begin to look at the integration of AI, particularly since so many AI basic tools are being made open source and being able to be made where they can be used into it and begin to chain together. I do, though, think that one of the important things, Dr. Sharif, with your audience here, is that AI is this element where AI is such a big word. It has 30, 40 different techniques underneath AI that can be used as part of it, from things like machine learning, natural language processing, really just simple Bayesian type of calculations. And even we get confused today, some of our search methodologies as being AI, when they're still very rules-based and they're very robot, bot-based of going out and searching and finding information and beginning to aggregate them. But AI is such a huge term that we have to begin to grasp and understand how it is. And the other thing that as we look at how AI is going to improve education, we'll see major things coming to play in it. UNESCO, for example, back in late 2020, introduced an international response called the Global Education Coalition. And its goal really was to bring open education AI to every system in education. And one of the folks who have really stepped up to that UNESCO goal is Microsoft with what they're doing with their programs. And they have an electronic management information system that they are beginning to push across it. And Microsoft with UNICEF and others are promoting principles for responsible AI and how those have to change and how those can be used and put in place. I mean, there's already been quite a bit of discussion on this broadcast so far today on the benefits of AI, but also, like most industries, we have to question some of the ethics of AI. Not all these AI systems are created equally as you look at them. And we know even with Chat GPT, the Microsoft products before, the Google products and others, they do get stuff wrong. And that's not something that is being talked a lot about, but it's one of the things that particularly if we jump with both feet into education with it, we need to understand that the training still is a challenge. And even though Rob talked about the size of the training sets, and I agree, they're getting quite large, and the larger the training set gets, the better they're going to be. But there's still bias in it. There's still places in there. There's still ethics that we've got to deal with in it. Also, both my son and I both have been spending time with some of the conversational AI. And he reminded me earlier this morning that one of the big differences you have with like Chat GPT is you have to know how to ask the question. Just asking a question, you're going to get a wide variety of answers back on it. And so it's like if some of us on the panel will remember when computer-based searching came out and we were asking Yahoo or Google or AIM back then questions, we had to be very careful with the syntax of how we requested it. And we even had to do Boolean type searches to get the right type of answer often back then. Well, the same thing applies to how you carry on a dialogue with a conversational AI as well, is that you have to be careful with how you ask it, and the context and the syntax of how you ask it, or you're going to get answers that are not what you had in mind. And you'll see some of those really happening there. The other thing is, some of the folks have talked about some of the benefits of it, where, students can receive more personalized tutoring, more personalized training. Also, you begin to see that the computer can set the pace. They can personalize the information for the different learning styles and capabilities of the students. One of the big things that we haven't talked about today, though, is that AI technology is going to be a boom, a huge boom for students with special needs, for students with learning disabilities, for parents trying to help their children, help themselves go through the different types of learning disabilities where AI can help shape that and begin to put it in there. The other thing is that we haven't already spoken about on today with some of the new AI is the fact that most of it is multilingual and that it's multiple languages that you can do. So let's say I'm in a household where English is a second language, for example. I can use the Chat GPT and the others as a tool to help translate between what maybe the child is learning and the adults. And because we all know that when parents are involved, you get a better education process out of the end. And these different type of AI tools are going to be a boon for that as we get uh, going forward. The other thing is that, you know, this type of AI should help teachers become better teachers, even though, like Brent said, most of them haven't embraced it yet. It should be able to give them new ways. Uh, I have a speech coming up, and I've decided I'm going to let Chat GPT write at least half of my speech, and I'm going to and actually do the slides for that part of the speech. And I'm really curious to see if the audience can distinguish what came out of Chat GPT versus what I'm talking about as well. And I mean, the only difference is I'm going to have to read part of what came out of Chat GPT, where I never do that when I'm giving speeches. But I'm going to try that as an experiment on this speech I'm doing at Innotech coming up, as a way to really push it a little bit more to the limits as far as I'm concerned, with how to use it as a way to pass knowledge on and hopefully wisdom on to people. I think it will do a good job of helping me shape the data, but I'm not for sure about the wisdom and the knowledge yet as we deliver it. The other thing I'd like to say is that I do not believe it's going to be long where we see the role of the teacher dramatically change because of not only artificial intelligence, but also because of virtual reality, but also because of the 3D environments we're building in the metaverse, uh, and metaverse's potential role in this as well. And also the use of, I think in the next 10 years, we'll see the use of robotics in classic classrooms a lot more than we see them today. And so this whole world where the fact that everything's digital, everything's communicates, and increasingly everything has sensors is also now beginning to apply into education as well too. So instead of a classical one-way learning technique, the teacher, the professor, the instructor to the students, you're going to have a multimodal type of learning environment where the teacher might just be a facilitator. The teacher might be a robot with more advanced type of recognition tools in it than a classic AI bot might have. But I think we're going to see a hybrid approach where all these different technologies, and AI is a very important part of those technologies, brought to bear to finally change the way we are taught, to finally begin to put the pieces together. I'm fortunate that earlier in my career, I was part of a pilot education program where the professors came to us. We had no textbooks. We used original source material for everything, and we used the inquiry process to learn. That year in this program with a bunch of other smart students fundamentally changed my career. It fundamentally changed how I learn. I think the potentials we see today of using these advanced AI tools with other things like the sensors, the Internet of Things, the virtual reality, they are going to make profound differences in the future of education for the current generation and the future generation. So thank you, Dr. Sharif.
Thank you, Mr. David Smith. Now I request Mr. Rob. Yes.
Well, sure. We kind of covered the topic. It is a major agent of change, and education, in my view, needs to embrace it rather than avoid it. I'm really concerned about the schools that are treating generative AI as if it's cheating. And certainly for some projects, it may be, but the skills that kids need to develop surrounding this technology are, I think, far more important than the skills they might develop by avoiding it. Now, that doesn't mean I don't think kids should learn how to write. When you're using generative AI and you're using it exclusively, you're going to find some things out about it. For instance, David Smith talked about having it write his speech. This last week, the CEO of NVIDIA had generative AI write his speech, and it was probably one of the dullest talks. He's kind of known for having talks that are pretty exciting and interesting to listen to. This wasn't one of those. It was heavy data rich. So it had more elements in it than any talk he's ever had. He covered every single product that they'd done and every single effort that they had completed. But it lacked the personality or the interest. Before he would talk aspirationally about how these things came together and would create a future, this speech had none of that in it. This was all in the present, everything that's being announced. One thing that was better, he did mention the other sessions and promoted them, which is often a best practice in terms of a keynote. So it was very much like the AI said, okay, we've got to cover this material, we've got to promote the rest of the event, but lost the part that says we also need to be entertaining. So it ended up being a very, very dry, but very data rich talk. And I think that lies within how you instruct the tool to perform. It can introduce humor into a talk. I was years ago, I was at a competition where Watson competed in debate, and the human debater won. If I'd been the judge, I would not have ruled it the same way. But the human debater won, but he won by being more robotic. If you were to listen to both of the performers and not seeing them visually, you would have probably concluded the AI was the person and the person was the AI. Because the win was on point, but the AI was telling jokes and introducing humor and was far more entertaining, which indicates that you can train an AI to appear more human than perhaps a human might appear in the same instance. That was what I walked away with in any case. But you have to provide that direction. If you just say, hey, cover this material and write me a talk, but don't provide the direction to introduce humor or empathy or anything that might make the talk interesting, you're going to get a really dry. It'll hit all the points because the AIs are very good at following direction, but it won't create a very good talk. And as I look much of the criticism for the tool right now, it's that it creates what you see is a lot of really kind of poor work. It's work that covers the topic, but it isn't very interesting to read. And directing an AI to create something interesting isn't at all easy, because humor is very different. And if you're the comedian, you kind of get to know your audience. The humor is directed at something they'll understand. For instance, you often, if you watch the shows like the Oscars, you'll see people get up and tell jokes and the audience is laughing, but most of us that are watching on TV, well, we don't really get it. And the reason is because it's an inside joke. The audience understands the dynamic, and so it's funny to them, but the broad audience on TV does not. And that's a real problem with, by the way, anybody who's speaking in front of a dedicated audience that's being televised, because you in fact have two audiences and you've got to figure out how to deal with both of them. An AI potentially could do that, but the way you would direct an AI to do that, well, that's beyond my skill set at the moment. And that goes back to the fact that being able to create good work with an AI that actually reduces the time you would take to create it does require a certain set of skills. And it still means you do have to understand the audience that the work is going to. You need to be able to direct the AI to address that audience and speak to that audience and create an output that audience will enjoy. Otherwise, you're just going to get the equivalent of a spreadsheet, a dictated spreadsheet, and it's going to be pretty dull. And that's probably the big point I want to leave before I pass over to for David Schumacher is what AI is good at out of the box is translating and regurgitating data. It's great at that. That what it isn't great at the moment is really putting in, without a lot of prompting, the entertainment aspects, the interesting aspects, the humor, the changes in voice. It's capable of doing that, but you have to provide the direction that will allow it to happen, and that takes iteration and time. And in some cases, creating a great talk with an AI might take as long as trying to create a great talk individually, just writing it longhand. But the difference would be somebody that isn't as good as a top speaker could use an AI to kind of level their capability. I'm using game language. Sorry about that. But the AI is kind of a force multiplier. And so it can allow you to be better if you focus on it being better. But if you just focus on the speed the product generates, your quality will be static. So if you're really good and you understand your audience, AI will make you faster. If you are not good and don't understand your audience, then you're still going to have to research those aspects, because making you faster to create a bad talk or a bad paper isn't going to do you any good. I was giving I wrote a paper, or excuse, an article the other day, and I was talking about the fact that the person that is most at risk with regard to AI is somebody that's focused on speed. And my editor says, well, why would you say that? Because an AI makes you faster. I said, yeah, but the person that's focused on speed trades off quality for speed. And they don't need more speed. They're already going fast. They need more quality. And for them, the AI is going to work against their weakness, not enhance their strength. The person that is high quality, the AI is going to speed them up. And so it addresses their weakness and doesn't degrade their strength. And so in the end, the AI is best right now for people that are focused on quality and will assure quality output. It's going to do damage to people that don't focus on quality and only want fast, because this will allow them to generate a lot of really crappy material, and that crappy material will reflect poorly on them. And so understanding the strengths and weaknesses of the tool the way it exists, and learning how to mitigate those strengths and weaknesses, and learning just how the AI fits into your personality is a great starting point to understanding how to use this tool to enhance what you're doing and not create yet another problem. And I'll pass over to David Schumacher.
Thank you, Mr. David Schumacher.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. I think you hit on one of the central things, at least for the next, who knows, 5-10 years. Hard to put a timeline on it. But the central thing that I picked up on is humans relate to humans. This is how we connect. This is how we transmit feeling, meaning, connection. It's all part of the educational process. Way back in my high school days, I had a history teacher. And by the way, I love history, but I had a history teacher that must have been an advanced AI, because he had no personality, and he could take the most interesting periods of history and turn them into something that was dry, though everything was very, very factual. So we don't need to replicate those type of things. We need to use our superpower of connection and being able to identify with our audience. And I think maybe forever, but certainly for the near future, that's clearly in the skill set of we humans. And it goes back to then using AI as a tool. On my first pass around, I talked about improving education with AI from the standpoint of an educator. So this time I'll take a minute or two and talk about it as a student. I decided a few years ago that that I needed a firmer understanding in the basics of business. So I decided to go back for another degree, and just recently finished that up. So I just finished about 3-year course of study going through learning business. And a lot of it that is taught these days is taught using the available tools that are out there to be able to manage your business, implement your business, to market your business. And I was fortunate to go to a university that uses a lot of this in their educational process. So I got a chance to kind of try this on and compare it with my previous university experience, and they were quite different, separated by a few decades. So this time around, I wasn't writing papers out by hand and then trying to type them. And first time around, I used a typing service to type up all my papers because it was worth spending the money for the improvement of the quality that they gave me in the typing product, which was part of the grade. So this time around, I started with something very basic, started using Microsoft Word to put my ideas down, used it to capture information when I was doing research. I used it to generate APA citations for me so that they would be perfect in the documents. And that was all very basic, because then I needed an add-on that really did other things for me, that would go through and do at a much higher level grammar checking and selection, word usage and suggestions of words. And then it had a built-in plagiarism checker. Now, Microsoft Word, I guess, has that too, but the add-on products are much better at it. And you could grade yourself before your professor or teaching assistant graded the papers to make sure that you hadn't spent a disproportionate amount of time just regurgitating somebody else's thought, not using those thoughts as seed to be able to get your own out. So those were great. But in this process, we had improvements in search engines, because I'd started off using the university library to be able to do basic research for the papers and so forth that I would have to write. And then I found that I had access to the equivalent of like a research assistant in the librarian force that I could give information to, and they would bring me back material, and then I could sift through that and write better papers. But now there's available online AI research assistants that will do the same thing, and they'll do it at midnight, at 2 in the morning, at 4 in the morning. I don't need to turn it in and wait a day or two for it to come back. And that whole cycle is changing. It's all incremental as AI enters into this. So is this cheating? Well, I don't think so. And not just because I was a student and wanting to get good grades, because I think it made me a smarter student. For example, a lot of the coursework, not all of it, but a lot of the coursework, especially in the higher level courses, were graded by a rubric to keep the level of grading equivalent across all the different students and across the teachers. So I would start Stephen Drucker. I'd start with the end in mind. I would go to the rubric and lay that out and say, these are all the things they're looking for in my paper. And then that's what I would target for research. So I would use those then as the seed for either what I was giving to the research assistant in the library or the research AI assistants that I went to be able to train me to look in and to make sure that I really understood that information and look at as many different sources as I could. And I had all the citations built in, and I could pick and choose. So word count, first time around when I was going to school, was a pressure to get my word count up to the acceptable level of whatever the professor wanted. This time around, the pressure was to get my word count down to the acceptable level of what, because I had such rich information available to me, which I think helped process through my mind better. So it goes, using these tools, I think, goes far beyond whether it's cheating or not. It's like, can I do the work better? In education, one of the dictionary definitions of education is to impart knowledge in schools to prepare students for the real work. If I'm going to use a calculator or a computer in my job as an engineer, then I should be taught how to use those in school. If I'm going to be doing business plans, if I'm going to do a SWOT analysis, if I'm going to do a balanced scorecard to manage processes that I put in place, then I should learn to do those in schools with the same tools that are available to me once out in the workforce. Or if I have people working for me, I want to make sure that they're using the most modern tools. There's a number of analogies that we could make there, but the base analogy is I want modern people using modern tools to solve modern problems. So there are schools out there that teach this. Not all of them are resistive. Do some shopping if you're a student that's listening to this, that make sure that you look for a 21st century school and make sure that they value the same type of things that you value, what you want out of your education. Remember that you're not going to school to get A's. You're going to school to learn, to think, to solve problems, to be able to identify them. So, quick example, and then I'll pass it on to a statistic class that I took not too long ago. It's kind of like the calculator example. They would show you the formulas, which looked scary to be able to do the different statistical calculations. And then Hewlett-Packard, once again, still makes great calculators these days. And there is a particular Hewlett-Packard calculator that was suggested that we all go buy. And I bought a soft version of it that runs on my screen. But what I found to be far more useful was to be able to take those statistical problems, to analyze them and figure out what they were asking for, and then open up an Excel spreadsheet and use the functions that are in Excel to be able to solve that problem. And it was better than doing it by hand. It was better than doing it by calculator, because anytime I had to solve something like that in the future, I already had a generic spreadsheet that already had all the formulas set up. I had to understand it to be able to put it in there. But now I had a tool that's going to save me time and give me a quality output to tag on to the end of what Rob was saying. So the proper use of tools can make us much, much better as we move along. Don't focus on the idea of cheating. Focus on the idea of expanding your skills, expanding your thought process, expanding what you can do. And the tools are going to keep on changing. I was going to talk about a number of different specific tools this time around, but you can do an internet search and find the explainers and the automated research assistants and the plagiarism checkers. And there's quite a raft of tools that are available, and that's only going to expand as AI's capabilities expand. So to keep this, to future-proof this talk, keep doing the searches, keep using what you can to get the best tools to go forward. Thank you, Dr. Sharif. That's my comments for today.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Tom.
Well, yeah, to Brent's point about how his teacher is hemming and hawing about, Chat GTP, it really makes my first point that, and now she's considering maybe teaching a class in it, is how AI, how these advents are forcing us to break paradigms of academia, which should have been broken years ago, and continually. And so, also to his point about how we're seeing a generation gap between millennials and even the younger generations, I think that could be maybe the lag time is caused by, that the millennials are still being taught by Gen X and boomers, and so hopefully we're in a lacuna where this period of time will pass, where digital natives will be teaching digital natives, and that'll, exponentially increase our knowledge in this world. But also, I think Rob and David's point about how it's so important to gain the skill of how to properly use syntax, or just how to properly ask an AI what you need. There's a word for that. I can't find it yet, but how to ask an AI to get the right results, and to David's point, so that you can trust those results. It's going to be a very important skill. There should be a whole class dedicated to that ability, to how do you ask an AI properly what you want to know. And there may be classes out there already, I'm not sure, but I think that's going to be a very important skill. It's like when the internet came out, I realized right away that and a student or an employee, it's no longer going to be about how they can recall facts. It's going to be about who can search best, to the same point, that how do you search for the facts that you need? That's going to be the real skill that now students are going to need to have when the internet came around, And so now it's going to be fine-tuned to AI, and how do we properly ask AI what we need to know, and then trust those results because we've asked it properly, And so, and also to the point about virtual reality, I think it's going to also expand how students learn, because it'll it'll offer heuristic lessons. People can go in and actually see a woolly mammoth, or go to an ancient marketplace, or in Rome or wherever they're learning, and actually experience physically or virtually physically what it was like to be there. It's going to be a really powerful teaching method, bringing in that heuristic sort of hands-on training experience for young people. And also, I think to Rob's point about how the NVIDIA CEO, I think, was made that speech, and how with using ChatGPT, and it was dull, although it's also very informative. I think that's an example of how even AI generative art, or how ChatGPT, it's going to be putting a premium on human generative works. A lot of people were complaining early on that this ChatGPT, or not Chat, but the AI and generative art could produce in seconds artwork that took them decades to perfect. But the market was so flooded with that so quickly that you start looking at humans that can do the same stuff, and or more abstract things, and it just really, I think, puts a premium on humans that can do this. And so again, like with the ChatGPT speech writing, it's a partnership with AI. You can get all the structure that you need and all the details that you need in there, but you've got to put in that human touch. You've got to inject comedy and humor and read the room. You got to leave yourself some space to actually read the room. AI can't do that yet. So yeah, I think it's very important. The AI coming into the educational system, and I've heard professors complaining that they can't tell if a student has written their paper in person or with ChatGPT. And again, that is just forcing us to change how we are teaching students, especially younger people. We need to be forced out of that paradigm of education and academia to evolve, to adapt, and from the abacus to the calculator, from having to remember facts and using literary rules to write a good paper, to having that done for you, and then looking deeper for the original thoughts. That's our power. That's one of our true superpowers, other than empathy and creativity and imagination, is our ability to generate original thought. And I think it's forcing us to get back to that, to remembering what it was like to be humans before the industrial age, or the church, or the elites. We put all that stuff on hold, so now it's giving us a real opportunity. And the onus, I always say, is on us to create a whole separate economy, or a whole separate educational system that is dedicated to those unique human skill sets that can't be coded or automated, at least not yet. And so it's really forcing us to remember what it was like to be human before all those qualities and powers were put on hold. And it's an opportunity to really fine-tune our Jedi powers, if you will. And so I think it's a very exciting time. Again, we're in this lacuna. We're in this period of time where there's going to be a lot of pushback, and people are afraid of it. And but it's 2 steps forward, 1 step back, and we will come out of this once we see how convenient AI has become, and once it just embeds in our society more, and we stop being afraid of it and start seeing the power of it. And I think it's really important to invest in it in the educational system, and to break that academic paradigm, so that we can customize curriculum to an individual student's core capacities. Have an AI companion learn that student or learn that employee so well that they can give them suggestions and continued education and networking opportunities and career paths that they didn't identify by themselves. And I think it's going to be an essential tool to have an AI companion if you're walking into an interview. You're going to be that much more qualified if you have an AI companion that knows you, knows how to keep you interested, knows how to give you the latest information on whatever field you're in. And so we need to first do that in the educational system. We need to train kids not only how to ask an AI the proper question, but just to develop a relationship with it and to let it know you, and to stop being afraid of it. And So that's all I really have to say. It's been a great education this episode, and I appreciate you guys very much for teaching me.
Thank you, Mr. Tom. Mr. Brent.
Definitely a lot of great food for thought here today. Kind of touching as well on some of the similar topics that David Smith and David Schumacher have expressed. Being, looking back in your educational paths, there were points where you were given the opportunity to be on the front lines of new developmental technologies with these different calculators and things like that, HP or Texas Instruments. When I was in middle school, there was something similar that I was a part of. The school that I went to, a public school in New York, we had in my middle school, we were separated by teams. And so your social studies class defined the team that you were on. And so everyone, the teacher that you had for social studies, each grade was separated into 4 or 5 teams based on that. And for some reason, the team that I was on, our specific social studies class time, was selected by the state of New York to be this testing ground for Palm Pilots back in 2012 or 13 or something like that. And they just decided to give all of us 13 or 14-year-olds Palm Pilots to see how they would help us or hurt us and see how they could be applied to the learning process. And I'm going to have to say it didn't really work out very well. We were all sitting there distracted, figuring out how to use Bluetooth or infrared or whatever it was to like play these little video games in class with one another, just kind of mind boggled by the technology. But, that doesn't mean that these handheld portable computerized devices didn't ultimately find their way to being very useful in the classroom setting. Whether or not you'd have a phone in your hand, everyone's already got one essentially, but, there's just so many uses. And so just because, a specific application might not, lead to the positive fruition that one would expect or anticipate doesn't mean that we should throw the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak. And going back to, this NVIDIA speech that was written by AI, it really is, like Tom was saying, related to how the queries and the prompts that we're putting in, because, I've been pleasantly surprised on the other hand with some of the responses I've gotten from AI, talking to AI about topics that I already know a lot on. Like for instance, when ChatGPT-4 came out, one of the first things I did was I asked it to write a lengthy piece about the history of the Grateful Dead, which was a topic that I'm familiar with. I grew up listening to the music and, understanding the band and the scene and such. And I was really impressed by the way that ChatGPT-4 was creating these meta references to things. For instance, the Grateful Dead have a song called Ripple. And, in the description of the Grateful Dead's history, the AI used the term ripple, implying that there were these ripple effects. And, and it was, when I was reading this, I was like, man, it really knows what it's talking about, because that's kind of the way that Deadheads will talk vernacularly. It's just this hip thing that people do where they're making these subtle references to songs that, it's like you're in the club, and to see AI doing this right off the bat, I was really impressed. I think that there are other ways as well to prompt AI, to say, hey, can you write this in the tone, an exciting tone, or can you write this so that it's going to be appealing to this audience? And, I think it really is just a matter of figuring out how to do that kind of stuff, from our own side of it. And, I've already seen classes out there online and things like that are helping people learn how to do these things and how to, prompt AI more effectively in order to get the results and the responses that we are trying to attain. And so, I think that there's a lot of potential there. And I think that, there's a lot of honing in our own abilities that's necessary to really make these tools as useful as possible to get them to their, full potential. But, I think that, it's really easy for someone to pick it up and, it's like like you were saying, David Schumacher, when you were using the calculator and then doing all your calculations by hand afterwards, it would have been really easy for you or for someone in a similar circumstance to be, to come to the conclusion, hey, why am I using this calculator in the first place? It's taking twice as long. I'm still doing these calculations anyway. But eventually you get to that point where you transition and you realize how to do these things. And, it's the opposite of diminishing returns, really. And so I think that, as time goes on, I think, it's just going to be, there's going to be it's going to be easier and easier to use these things, and more widespread. Or, there could also be this major gap that comes to exist in society where you have these technophiles and Luddites, essentially. But I mean, I guess that's kind of already been the status quo. It's just that divide and, the percentage of the population on either side of the fence is always just kind of changing. But I think that it's pretty difficult to not want to not see the ways that this technology can help us. Similarly to what you were talking about with those calculations and an application that I've downloaded on my phone. It's called Paxo. And so if anyone's in school or anything, Paxo is a really useful app for note taking. But I don't, like you were saying, David, I don't trust it to do it for me. So I will have me and the AI program running simultaneously. And what Paxo will do is it'll listen to the conversation. It's able to differentiate speakers. So it knows speaker one, speaker two, however many folks who are talking. And it transcribes the entire class session. But then it also provides notes where it's giving you a much more brief understanding of everything that's being discussed. And then when you're going through the notes, you can click on little parts of the notes and it will bring you to the live recording that's been recorded, as well as the transcription. And you can, go there and kind of analyze it to make sure that you understand it. And I mean, it's just so useful. There's a certain point to which I'm not spending hours and hours analyzing each class afterwards. But, there are certain points where I, have gone to my notes before using Paxo, and I've been, a bit disappointed because I didn't provide myself with enough information on a topic that we were learning about. And then I have to go to different websites like Chegg or, just search engines in general to kind of help, better understand these ideas. And, with these things, these apps, and these technologies, filling in these, gaps and stuff. And it's really impressive in my opinion. And it's just, as these things continue to develop, some of these processes might initially run in ways that seem clunky and inefficient, but there's a learning curve for all of it, really. And I think that, ultimately, these things are going to, benefit the world. And like Tom was saying, people will always pay this premium for human error. I had an opportunity a month or so ago to buy some artwork that was created by an artist that I'm, friendly with and have been following for years, that he created in tandem with the use of artificial intelligence. And, there were themes that he was using. There was these images, and it was all related to like this Hyperborean theme. And so I think that applying those themes and understanding certain things that are popular in social, in mainstream culture and things like that, is going to be really important to make these, to make this stuff come, to be able to profit off of this type of, AI modified artwork, because for me, this artwork was less expensive than if I were to buy, original or even G-Clays from him that weren't AI generated. But at a certain point, eventually, I talked myself out of it because, I was like, well, how long did it really take him to make this? But if I had been there in person, because we were discussing it online, he's out in New Mexico. It's a very good possibility that if he was sitting there at, a farmer's market or a music festival or some sort of gathering in person, that I wouldn't have talked myself out of it, because there was, there was enough time where I was, able to think about it and, realize, hey, I've got enough artwork as it is. But I think that it's, we'll also get to a point where, the stuff that's being, manipulated with AI, music and things like that. I mean, just look at music, the way that it has changed over the last few decades, with, voice boxes and, these synthesizers, things like that, where I remember, 10, 20 years ago, people were talking about, these pop music artists using these voice changers to help them harmonize and things like that. And, there was a level of discredation that came along with this type of awareness of an artist. And, now we're at a point, though, where no one cares about that, really. Nowadays, when people make these interesting, voice alterations in their music, I think that people are enjoying it. Whereas, 10, 20 years ago, people were, harping on, the way that these sounds would just kind of all sound the same and stuff. And so, I think it's the public opinion on all these things it's, I think it's really important to form our own opinions and not allow the public and, the population to form our opinions for us. Because, it's those public opinion changes with the wind, and so I think that it's really important for us to be finding our own path and finding ways for these things to be applied in our own lives and make these decisions and opinions on our own. And at the end of the day, if people want to be hesitant to using these technologies, I'm all for that, because my perspective is, well, eventually the technology is going to come along and you're going to see how useful applying that is to what you do. And so, it's these people that are the late slow adopters are also propelling the industry, because, the people that have all adopted to Google, or whatever it might be, Chat GPT, there's no reason for improvements in these industries or with these technologies. I've been reading a book, A Brief History of the Future. And in it, he talks about this, capitalist perspective of how technology is going right now, and that right now, through this capitalist model, these tools are being developed and they're being offered at cost for different costs, and then the costs are dropping significantly because it's becoming radically easier to create these tools, and ultimately, eventually, these things are being offered for free. And that's kind of this progress that we're going on, where all of these different tools are slowly becoming more widespread in their access, and anyone can access it. I've found Fiverr was a few years ago, Fiverr was a wonderful option for people that were trying to do that first draft, or a business plan or a marketing plan, or get something written. And you could find these people all around the world that you can pay a little extra money to, and they would do this stuff for you. And now we have these AIs that are doing it entirely for free. But it's not like these folks who are intelligent and capable and able to do this stuff for us don't have an opportunity to make money and succeed still. And I think that there is the other side of it too, though, where, I'm a libertarian, but I still think that there's got to be a way to monetize the way that AI is reducing work opportunity, because, there's always going to be these jobs, working with AI and all this stuff. But I think that, folks like Andrew Yang, who have these ideas like automation taxes, even from the libertarian perspective, I see that this is going to benefit us. I see that if people are able to actually have the time to understand what they're passionate about, rather than just, like our education system was designed, to quote Rockefeller loosely, to create workers, not thinkers. And that's, the state of affairs, currently. But, when this workload is getting greatly diminished by the day, well, we're stuck thinking. And I think that's something that we need to be doing more of, in all honesty, and thinking, effectively and critically, and not allowing others to do it for us and just simply rehashing what we've been told. And so I think that it's going to be a wild world, these next 5 to 10 years, and I don't think it's going to take that long to get us to where we think we're going, or where we might wind up. But thanks again, Dr. Sharif, and everyone, for your time today. Cheers.
Thank you. Mr. David Smith.
Well, Dr. Sharif, thank you for an excellent topic today. I think the one thing we didn't talk about today about the use of AI in education is the fact that this will help education finally go global. It will allow us to begin to use the knowledge bases that we're using to train the artificial intelligence tools to reflect the uniqueness, the culture, the understandings of a global basis. Where education in the past, we tended to have the biases of the local ecosystem we're in, the teachers were there, and this will let us, with the other technology tools we have, begin to look at education from a more global, more inclusive basis, which I think is a very good way to do it. But I love you talking about your current classes right now. I actually am thinking about the fact that I'm a believer in lifelong learning, and I cannot wait till I'm in my fully autonomous car. I'm taking what I'm wanting to look at and what I'm trying to do, and I'm going to project it in 3D on my heads up display in the car. I will have all the resources around me. And I just came back from a 4-hour drive in each direction on a trip from Austin to Dallas. Boy, that would have been great learning time. I mean, as it is, I tend to use it for office time anyways. I'm always on the phone or something like that. But, just think of that with where we're going with technology. Uh, I can not only see a picture of something, let's say in Rome, but I also can pull the sensors up. I can do the other elements like that. I can have a robot do experiments for me at a distance where all the materials are there and get my own custom results back and get my personalized learning that way as well, and how that can work. I, I love some of the comments that we're having over in the comment section as well. In that, yes, I believe that artificial intelligence can be a driver for more types of educations there, and that it helps us do more type of cross references, gives us access to more resources and things. But there's also a comment that she made about uh, it being open source, and it being open source takes away some of the profit in there. I think you're still going to have places where profit with the more advanced AIs come into play, because I can tell you it not only takes a lot of data to train them well, the resources, the power resources are tremendous on that. Dr. Sharif, if you remember the program uh, last week where we were talking about sustainability, and we saw how much electricity the computers use to train a model in natural language processing. This type of AI requires a lot of resources, a lot of computing power, a lot of bandwidth, uh, and it takes the resources to provide it there too. And yes, because we're using photons and fiber and other things, there's a lot of ability to transmit it, and how we can do it. So it's there, but the concept that all the resources being brought to bear for artificial intelligence are free. Uh, I can tell you in my own companies, I know they cost us quite a bit. I know the resources cost us quite a bit. So there has to be a way as you begin to use the more advanced ones to recover access to it. I mean, it's like we talked about GPT-4. You know, OpenAI is now making GPT-4 commercial and not open access, not open access as we know now, not open source. So we're going to be see as the technology matures more and as we move up that S curve, you're going to see more and more of a commercial version of these come into place with other benefits, other data sets and things that we can see there. So um, a lot of changes coming up on this. I think we're in the early stage of that S curve on how AI is going to be really used in education. Like I said, I am excited that it's changing the education model. It needed to change, just like the healthcare model needed to change. and the pandemic helped us change the healthcare model. The pandemic and this explosive use of new conversational AI and sensors and others is going to help us change the education model again as well. So, Dr. Sharif, thank you so much.
Thank you. This is excellent discussion. I'm sure from this dialogue, especially the youth communities and industry can learn many more things. And we are working closely with the industry, specifically right now in South Asia. So I want to invite you all in Nikola Tesla Technology Conference in July, and those who want to visit Bangladesh or India. So I want to invite you all, and definitely you can apply your knowledge and expertise, and you can collaborate with more corporations. Thank you everyone for joining today's session. Thank you, Mr. Rob. Thank you, Mr. David Schumacher, especially Mr. Tom Ross, uh, Mr. Brent Hellman, and Mr. David Smith. I request all of our audience, please share our content with your government agency, corporation, and academy. Thank you. Bye-bye, and take care.